Well, so good to be here at church with everybody today, and I'm excited to bring the word. Can we thank the worship team as well? And they'll be coming back up in a moment. I want to encourage us as a church as you come in for the worship team. It really helps having been on the worship team since I was about 12. I started learning bass in church, and then the bass player of our church left, so I was the bass player. I knew 3 chords or 3 notes, and most songs have at least 4. So I would play the 3 and wait for the 4th one and just do nothing and wait for the next chord to come back around. But what really helps from a worship point of view and even with the congregation is when you come in, just to clap a little bit along with us. I know a lot of people were doing that. I'm not trying to make this out like everybody's not doing it. But as you come in, just to kind of add to what is happening and add to the atmosphere of the room and build faith for others. You know, sometimes we can come in and we're tired and we're feeling different ways. And just that simple act of clapping and kind of focusing our eyes and our attention on God can actually lift us as well. And for those that maybe come in that aren't in a place to do that, having someone around you that's excited about being at church, that's excited about God and what is happening is infectious. So just want to encourage us, not saying anything negative there, but just encourage us. So as you come in, please help the worship team as well and yourself as we lift up praise to our amazing God. I'm sure some people at a Raiders game don't look the same as they do in church. I'm not going to say who or what. I'll leave that picture in your mind. You can do it. And I just wanted to look around. If you see anyone in a flannel shirt, a plaid kind of thing, just give them a high five because that was the uniform today. If you're online as well, and you can do that as well. I was actually wondering, should I wear this? I asked Michelle, does this look good? And she said it does, but I'm like a bit self-conscious, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore. We'll see if it comes out again later. Anyway, okay, we're here for the Word of God. And I'm excited to be able to bring a word today. And I've got a question for us as we start. It's a big question, and I want us to sit and think about it for a moment. But the question is, where do you run when you're empty? Where do you go to when you're empty? I'm talking about empty on the inside. And why does that thing that fills you maybe temporarily keep leaving you empty, keep leaving you thirsty, keep leaving you wanting to come back again and again and again? You know, there's many different kinds of empty that we can have. I've got a picture behind me of some. And because this is different for everyone. I know we're kind of jumping straight into this morning. I'm not giving anyone a chance to kind of take a breath. We're going straight into it. Because there's different kinds, and this is not an exhaustive list. Yours might be different, but there's tired empty, the kind that a day off or a weekend or a holiday just never seems to fix. There's stressed empty, where you feel like you're running on fumes, and at any moment you can kind of snap. Doesn't matter what the thing is. Circuit breaker is a good thing to go to as well. There's lonely empty, where you can feel this ache of, I don't know where I belong, I don't know who I'm with, and that can happen in a room full of people. People might be feeling that in this moment right now in this room. There's driven empty, where you just have to keep going. You have to keep performing. You have to keep doing your best. You have to keep succeeding. You have to keep achieving, but it comes at the cost of kind of who you are. It kind of eats away at you, and often it could be maybe from expectations unrealistic from a parent or from someone as you grew up as a child that's spoken into your life. There's that kind of empty as well. There's also a success empty, where you feel like you're going to achieve a certain place in life when you get that promotion or when you get that thing or when you buy that house, and then you do it and you feel the same again. You feel that emptiness kind of come in. The success doesn't actually fill it. There's many different empties. There's a hurting empty, where something's happened. There's pain, there's trauma. There's maybe things that you're ashamed of. And it leaves you with this kind of hole in your life, this gap that you need to go back to and find things to fill it. And as I said, this isn't even a full list. Yours could be something different to this, but we all have an emptiness or something within our lives, a potential that it draws us back. And we're going to look at an interaction in the Bible as to how Jesus helped someone overcome this and how he helps us as well. But there's a particular kind of tiredness or emptiness or whatever that just water alone can't fix. You can be fully hydrated, you look amazing on the outside, but on the inside, you're not. There's a thirst in there that whatever you keep filling it with, it never seems to make a difference. And so we're talking about today in John 4, the woman at the well, and she comes to this well. And before we get into it, I want us to be thinking about what's our well? What's the thing that we keep coming back to? And we keep dragging our buckets along to this well for something to fill us temporarily, but we have to keep coming back to it. Where do you go when you feel empty? What happens when that ache comes in? What happens when things don't work out the way that you thought they should? What happens when the stress is there, the pressure is there, and it squeezes out something that you're reaching and you're not necessarily finding it fully in Jesus? You're going into other places. We've all got these wells. Could be career, the next achievement. Could be that relationship that we're looking for, that we're hoping is going to fix everything. It could be a constant need for approval. Maybe it's keeping so busy that you never have time to sit still, because if you sit still, you start thinking about everything. You're throwing yourself into work. Maybe it's trying to stay in control of everything, or it's quietly pulling back. It could be the endless doom scroll that we find ourselves in, looking for that dopamine hit. Maybe it's the drink every night before you go to sleep, just to be able to kind of take the edge off the day or whatever it is. Or it's a picture of a comfortable life that you're hoping at some point you'll end up there. Some of the wells that we can be going to do look like sin. But not all of them is necessarily that. But we're looking for something external to fill an internal thirst, an internal hunger. And that's what we're talking about. And I'm believing today that as we look at this story of Jesus with the woman at the well, and we see this interaction and what Jesus is offering, that freedom is going to come into this place. Freedom is going to come into your lives. Because you could have been a Christian for 2 decades and still have this well that you go back to. You might not go back to it every day all the time, but there's still something there. And Jesus wants to be Lord of all. There's a line, a famous line that says, if Jesus is not Lord of all, he is not Lord at all. And him wanting to be Lord of all is actually offering something in exchange, which fills us in a way that nothing else can. And we're going to get into that. But you see, there's a trap to this. There's a cycle if we go to the next slide. And this is not trying to oversimplify it, but this is what can happen. Have an internal desire that's triggered by something external. We go to this finite well, this well that can't fully satisfy, but it gives us temporary relief. And then the thirst returns, or the emptiness returns. And we go through this cycle over and over and over again. And this can be something that is very subtle. Very subtle. This can be very obvious as well. It's something that speaks to all of us. The truth is, when we go to our well, it's not the devil dragging you there. The Bible says in Genesis, we're actually tempted and drawn away from God by our own desires. We're walking to this well ourselves. We're dragging this bucket ourselves. The devil doesn't need to invent it. He just needs to work out which one it is and cause you to stay there. And so last week we finished our Living Legacy series. On Life Legacy Sunday, we looked at a widow in the temple courts that everybody else had overlooked. And Jesus puts a spotlight on her to his disciples and says, she has given everything she has. She's given the most out of everything here. She put 2 tiny small coins in there, barely made a sound. Everyone else has got the showy kind of basketball shot going into the thing and it's rattling around. Someone who was completely overlooked by society, but Jesus recognized him to the point where we still tell stories about her today. I want to take us to another woman that the world had looked past. The world had overlooked, except this time Jesus doesn't wait for her to come to the temple. He goes out of his way to find her at a well. To see how this gets resolved and to learn from this, we're going to go back 2,000 years to a journey that Jesus took. It's found in John chapter 4. We're going to read from verse 4, and we're going to talk through these things as we go. John chapter 4. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" I'm going to pause there. There's a crucial detail that we have at the start of this where Jesus said that he had to go through Samaria. Now, geographically, he didn't actually have to do that. We've got a map here, and you'll see the dotted line, if you can see it. That's the line most people would take, where you cross the Jordan twice and you bypass Samaria completely. That's the route that most people took because it was not safe in many ways for Jews to travel through Samaria, and we'll get into that in a moment, whereas Jesus said he had to. Now, biblical scholars are divided as to whether he had to, in terms of there was a timing point thing and there wasn't time to take the longer route he had to go through, or whether it was a mission critical had to go through. I think it's a mission critical. Jesus had a mission that he wanted to achieve, and it was in Samaria at this well with this woman. And so that's where I'm coming from, but scholars are divided on this. But this was a dangerous road that Jesus took, and I believe he took it on purpose for this very meeting, which was going to trigger something amazing and also speaks to us now in where we are. So in order to understand how dangerous this was, we need to understand who the Samaritans were. And so when Assyria conquered the northern kingdom around 722 BC, there was a combined kingdom that David had established. Solomon builds a temple. At the end of Solomon's reign, pretty much the north and the south gets divided. Hundreds of years later, the northern kingdom gets overtaken by Syria, and the people left behind intermarried with the resettled foreign peoples. And over centuries, a distinct people emerged, the Samaritans, and their very name comes from the Hebrew word shema, which means to guard or to keep. And so they saw themselves as the keepers of the faith. They thought they were the ones that were being true to the Torah, true to the teachings of Moses, the book of the law, and they rejected everything else other than the first 5 books. And they worshipped on Mount Gerizim and not Jerusalem. So for a first century Jew to be called a Samaritan, this is a slur to them. But the thing is, the hostility wasn't because they were so different, it's actually because they were so alike. There were 2 families that were sharing the same patriarchal father, which is Jacob, both convinced that the other had betrayed the faith. And this is where the animosity and the tension comes from. And we know often in our lives, the worst feuds are often family feuds. And this is really a family feud. And so Jesus going through, he's taking a dangerous journey because the ancient documents of that time, Josephus, who's a historian, records Jews being killed by Samaritans as they go on this journey, which is why they took that route. So Jesus said he had to, and then he comes and sits down at a well and asks a Samaritan woman for a drink. He's not just making small talk, he's deliberately crossing every cultural line of his day to reach this woman. Again, we're going to look at the setting just quickly because it's amazing here. This passage has so many layers to it. I'm going to try not to get too excited and go for ages talking about it because I love the Bible and I love the layers in the Bible and how it's all connected. But this town is in Sychar. It's right beside Jacob's ancient well. If you don't know who Jacob is, it's Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob. These are the forefathers of our faith. And this is Jacob's well that he established, and you can read about his story in Genesis. And so they're right beside Jacob's ancient well. And John also gives us, John is the writer of the book of John, he gives us another bit of information, and that is that Joseph's bones are buried at this well. Joseph is the one who went through incredible hardship in his life, one of Jacob's sons, and ends up becoming the second in charge over Egypt and saves the land from a famine. And it's an incredible story. And we want to keep Joseph in mind as we continue to go through this story, because this conversation at the well is about to fall into sync with what happened in Joseph's life, which is a picture of what this woman is going to do. And then there's also a picture of what Jesus does as well. So just keep that in mind. Now we're going to read John chapter 4, 9 to 12. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." Jesus answered her and said, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. This is the name of this sermon, living water. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? And we skip a little bit. We're going to get to that in a moment. Come back in at verse 16. He told her, go and call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, I have no husband, she replied, full stop. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Now, I feel like this lady throughout history has had some pretty bad PR. She is the town scandal. She's the one that, no one likes her. They judge her and all these different things. She really needs a better PR manager in this story. I'm going to act as that a little bit, okay? Can I do that? I'm going to push back a little bit on some of the myths that we may have been taught, some of the ideas, because as we look at the actual story and the text itself, Jesus doesn't imply that because she's had 5 husbands, those equal 5 sins. We know in those days, in the ancient world, a woman couldn't initiate a divorce. They weren't able to give a certificate and say, I don't want to be married anymore. It was the man that did that. And a man could do it for trivial reasons in those times, which was not good. So 5 marriages could easily mean 5 rejections. It could also mean 5 tragedies. Maybe someone's died or there's been disease or something's happened. Whether it's through death, whether it's through disease, or whether it's through abandonment, she's had 5 husbands and now she's with someone who's not her husband. And so it's amazing that Jesus names this situation, but he's not actually calling it as sin. And if we think about the end of the story, which we'll get to in a moment, where she goes back to the town and everybody listens to her, that's not necessarily the kind of person that people would listen to if they are the town scandal. And so I'm just going to give her a little bit better PR and say maybe she's had a really hard life. And the choices and the situations that she's been in hasn't been always of her own, volition. It's just something that's happened to her and she's trying to do her best. And what's interesting is she's quite knowledgeable in both tradition and scripture because she points out things to Jesus. We're going to look at that a little bit. I would like to say, instead of her being the town scandal, that she's actually a tragic figure that's had a really hard life. The kind of life where there's that exhaustion where you don't necessarily make the best decisions all the time. You wake up late, you go to bed early, your schedule's all out of whack. And she finds herself going for water in the middle of the day, worst time to do it, hottest time to do it. And an interaction is going to happen which is going to lead to her becoming an unlikely evangelist and the first evangelist to this town. And this is where Jesus meets her. The point is not that she's scandalous, is that she's thirsty. She's tired, she's overlooked, and Jesus came all the way out of his way to meet her. I want to encourage us today. You might be tired, you might be empty, you might be thirsty, you might feel overlooked. Jesus comes all the way out of his way to meet you today, right now, in this place. Yeah. This is the Jesus that we serve, the Jesus that we love. And so there's a few things happening that I want to talk about very quickly without getting lost in it all, because to me it's exciting. To others it might not be, but the Bible is awesome. There's another scene that's happening, that's playing out at the same time, and this is a betrothal type scene. And so if you've read the Old Testament, particularly Genesis and Exodus, you'll see a bit of a pattern happening. And I want to put it to us like this. Who's ever seen a Western movie? Yep, a couple of people put their hands up, awesome. In a Western movie, what do you think is about to happen when all of a sudden the streets get empty? The tumbleweed, tumbleweed goes across, and then you see the guys like, what's going to happen? Gunfight, exactly. I'm just making up words today. Exactly. If we go to the next slide, a foreign land, a man at a well asking a woman for a drink. This is that same scene playing out, which we know is about to be a gunfight. The first century listener would have known a wedding's about to happen. This is a wedding. And so I'm not saying that Jesus is trying to marry her. Not at all. But it's interesting because Abraham's servant is sent out to go and find a wife for Isaac, and he meets Rebekah at a well. And then there's a wedding. Jacob wants to go and find a wife. He goes to a foreign land. He meets Rachel at a well, and then there's a wedding. Moses runs away from Egypt and goes into a foreign land, meets a woman at a well, Zipporah, and there's a wedding. To add even more layers of awesomeness to this, a lot of these happened around noon, which is not the time of day you go to the well. As I said, it's very hot. And so Jesus happens to arrive at noon. Who knows, Jesus is never not on time, right? We can feel like he's late sometimes, but he's never not on time. He knows what he's doing. So he gets there at noon, and this is setting up a scene which is showing Jesus as the true bridegroom. Funnily enough, one chapter earlier in John 3:29, John the Baptist literally calls Jesus the bridegroom. And it echoes the language and the imagery that's found in Hosea and Isaiah, where God is pictured over and over again as a faithful husband pursuing a faithless bride. This is a picture of Jesus being the bridegroom for mankind, for a people that, as it said in Hosea, that are faithless. And he puts himself in this scene, both for her and also for us. And so when he picks up that when he talks to her about her husbands, he's not doing that to spring a trap on her or to shame her. He's moving the conversation to where it needs to go. And who knows, this is how Jesus works. We have things in our lives, gaps, emptiness, fears, all these things. And Jesus will always put his finger on it through the Spirit and not let us deviate from that, from that thing. We want to talk about anything else but the stuff that we really need to. And Jesus always is putting his finger on it, not to hurt us, not to shame us, but to set us free. And so Jesus moves this conversation to exactly where it needs to go. And he's drawing this tired, exhausted woman back to God, offering her real, unbroken covenant love. What she's really looking for, that she's trying to find in a man, and it's not working. She needs to find it in God. She needs to find it in Jesus. And this is what we're dealing with here. And Jesus, at the same time as he's talking to the woman in the well, he's talking to you. And he's wooing you in. He's drawing you into this real, unbroken covenant love that he wants to pour out on you and through you. But she's pretty quick, as we've established, and she pushes back on Jesus, many different things. And there's a couple of things I want to pull out real quick. She says, "Sir, you don't even have a bucket and the well is deep. Are you greater than our father Jacob?" Anyone read that and thought, it's an interesting thing, I wonder what that means? Anyone? No one? Just me? Okay, cool. I'll say this for me then. There's a tradition that's preserved in an ancient Aramaic commentary called the Targum that listed miracles that God did for Jacob. And one of them was that when Jacob went to the well with no bucket, the water welled up, I suppose, and overflowed to the point where he could drink of the water without needing a bucket. And so Jesus turns up at the well. Whose well is it? Jacob's well. He's got no bucket. And she's realizing what's happening and says, "Are you saying that you're better than Jacob, the guy who established that we know the miracles? Are you better than him?" And Jesus is kind of saying like, yes, I am. And we'll get to that in a moment. But she's kind of sparring with him a little bit and challenging him. And I hear a bit of sarcasm sometimes in some of the stuff that she says. But the crux of it is here, because what does Jesus offer her in return for the water that she's going to give him? As we listen to his promise in John chapter 4, 13 to 14, Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." We keep thinking everything is about this practical well, about this physical water that we have to keep coming back to over and over again, and we get tired and we get grumpy, we're fearful, we've had stuff that's happened, and we pull out our phone and we doom scroll. We go back to these places, we drink, we start to fear and worry that everything is gonna fall apart. We get controlling and we start to yell at everybody and order everybody around. We go back to these places trying to feel something that only can be filled by God. And what Jesus is saying, you don't have to keep coming back to this well. It can actually be a source of life that flows out from within you. And instead of going somewhere for what you need, you go within and find through the Spirit of God, there's a river of living water that you have access to in your life at any moment of any day. This is the living water that Jesus is speaking about. And it's not just for her, it's for us right now and for everybody else. Don't keep going back to the temporary well that satisfies for a while, but then the thirst comes back. Find the source of life in Jesus, the spring that can well up from within. The wording here is in Hebrew is mayim chayim, sorry. And this word, it's an interesting phrase. It's a specific one. It means living water. And in a religious sort of sacrificial context, it's the deepest purest water for ritual cleansing. This is the idea. It's the opposite of stagnant water. It's living, flowing water. But it's talking more just about purification. It's actually going all the way back to the Garden of Eden and the fount that was in the Garden of Eden. That is the river of life. This is the imagery that's coming through when you use this phrase in this context. That's what I love about the Bible is it links, everything's connected together. Jesus is offering something that we originally had but we lost. And he's offering it back to us again. And all we need to do is ask him for it. Receive him into our lives, and something happens within us by the Spirit of God that establishes the presence of God within us. That becomes a well that we can draw from at any moment of any day. We don't have to go to those places. We don't have to go to those websites. We don't have to doom scroll. We don't have to think like we've got to control everything. We don't have to freak out every time something happens in the world and we're wondering, is fuel going to cost $5 a litre? I mean, you can be concerned, but you don't have to freak out about it. There's a well of life within you. That's the source of everything. And many of us have spent years going back to the same well to fill that same void, tired, stressed, lonely, never enough. When Jesus wants to let that well that's within you, that spring that's within you, overflow and carry you through every situation. This is how we make a difference in our world. It's the source. It's not us, it's God in us. You're in your workplace and something's happening. Maybe there's doing redundancies and you're starting to think what's going to happen. Everybody's freaking out. You got this well within that you can draw from. People start to notice, hey, how come you're not freaking out right now? Oh, God's my source. Whoa, that's pretty different. I never heard that before. What does that mean? Uh-oh, now you're an evangelist. In the right way, that's good. I mean that in a good way. Basically, this whole sermon in one line is we keep going back to wells when Jesus wants to put a spring inside of us. We're getting close to the end. Band team wants to come back up. There's a really important part in this because she starts to click on and she says, I know the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us. She's kind of reaching, hoping, maybe guessing. And if anyone ever says, when does Jesus explicitly say that he's God in the Bible? This is it right here, John 4. She says, I know the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us. Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, am he. I don't know if you see those videos on YouTube. Jesus never claimed to be the Messiah. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And it's interesting who he told this to, which tells you about the value in God's kingdom. We think the most important looking people are the ones that God cares about the most, but often it's the ones that are overlooked the most that God reaches out to. I, the one speaking to you, and am He. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus is very careful with who He says this to. He silences demons that He's cast out who come to Him and reveal it. He tells people that He's healed, not to broadcast it. He even shushes the disciples after Peter confesses who He is. And so it's often thought about as this messianic secret. Yet here in John's Gospel, it's explicit. Jesus says who He is. Couple last things. There's another line in this that it says, Jesus, tired as He was from the journey, sat down by the well. This is one of the deepest mysteries in this whole thing, because Jesus is God, but He's also man. And He's tired from this journey and He becomes thirsty and goes to the well. He is the source of living water that flows within us. And yet He's tired and He's thirsty. He takes on a weary human body, walks a dangerous road that He didn't have to walk, sits down to wait. So this broken, exhausted woman would never have to be thirsty again. It might seem simple to you, but Jesus became thirsty so that we would never have to be thirsty again. This is a beautiful picture of Jesus, the sacrifice that He makes for us, that He made for us. Which brings us right back to the exhaustion that we started with, this emptiness. There's a brilliant thinker named Blaise Pascal put words into this exact thirst. Often misquoted as a God-shaped hole. He didn't actually write that. But he says, there once was in man a true happiness, of which all that now remains is the empty print and trace. This he tries in vain to fill with everything around him, though none can help, since this infinite abyss can only be filled with an infinite and immutable object, in other words, by God Himself. This is the world that we're living in, this infinite abyss that everybody's throwing stuff in to try and fill this void, to get a temporary sense of relief from the pain, the fear, the trauma, the drivenness, whatever it is. And we keep throwing it into this abyss, and it makes no impact because we're throwing finite things into an infinite hole that can only be filled by an infinite God. So very quickly as we come to a close, what do we do? What do we do now? Very practically, the first thing is we've got to recognize Him as the source. We've got to recognize Jesus as the source for everything that we need. This is both spiritual and practical. He's the answer for everything in your life. Going to Him is the answer for everything in your life. Not always going to those external places, but searching within to that spring that He has established in you by His Spirit. If you've made that decision to accept Him as your Lord and Savior, going to that place and saying, God, this is what I need. This is where I don't want to go to these other things and try and reach and figure it all out in my own strength. I want to do it through you. You are the source. Jesus is the source. And in every situation, we need to start recognizing Him. Every day, recognizing Him. The Bible says if we're faithful in the little, we'll be faithful in a lot. We come to God when we got need. We come to God when there's big problems. But what about when it's just a little thing? We start to build a habit of going to Him and recognizing Him in every situation. He is the source. Recognize Him. The second thing is stop returning to that well. Stop it. Stop going back there. It's not going to satisfy you. It's not going to fill you. It's not going to give you what you need. It might work for a moment, an hour, a day, a week, but you're ultimately going to be empty again going back to that well. Stop going back to the well. Go to Jesus. Search within through that spring of life that has been established within you. Don't get stuck in that loop. Put practical things in place to stop yourself when the pressure is not on. Put things in place that will stop you going back to that well and going to Jesus. And the last one is leave it behind, or leave it, the bucket. Drop that bucket that you drag to that well. Leave it behind, and then go and tell someone about what God has done in you. Go and tell someone about the freedom that you found in Christ. Go and tell someone about this spring of life that's a mystery, but an incredible miracle from the Spirit of God, establishing this within you that fills you in everything that you need and flows out of you. Last thing, John 4:28-30, it says this, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of the town and made their way toward him, and he stayed there for a few days, and many people were saved in that moment. Could it be Jesus came to that very spot for this woman to show her that she's not overlooked, she's not forgotten, she's not the outcast or whatever, but she's important to God himself. And in that moment, it triggers a revival. We talked about Joseph's bones being buried at this well. Joseph endured incredible hardship. Sold into slavery by his brothers, wrongly accused by the master of the house that he was serving in, put in prison, interpreted dreams that helped one person get out and then was forgotten. Decades of disappointment, decades of delay, decades of potential feeling lost and worthless, but something was different about Joseph. And it all ultimately led up to him being invited to go before Pharaoh, interprets the dream, and gets positioned as second in command over all of Egypt and saves Egypt and the very lineage of Christ. This woman going through incredible hardship, 5 tragedies, 5 times building a life with someone, and 5 times being let down or hurt, whatever it is. This very moment where Jesus meets her in the midst of this pain, heals her, becomes this source, and then she goes back and it triggers a revival. Jesus himself, often called the suffering servant, suffers on the cross, ultimately being the person that brings salvation to the whole world. And we're at this well in this scene. The bones of Jacob are in the ground. I'm wondering if in the midst of your trauma, in the midst of your heartache, in the midst of the things that feel so hard, could Jesus meet you there? And could that be a trigger that brings a revival, that brings an awakening, that brings someone to come to the knowledge of Jesus Christ? Not to downplay what you're going through, but when we give, whatever we give to God, it's never wasted. I can say this from my own life. The beautiful part within this is that God uses people while he's still changing them. She didn't quickly go do a 3-year theological degree and then make it back to the town. She just ran there and said, come see a guy who told me everything I've ever done. So what are you still carrying that you're always meant to leave at the well? Dragging this bucket. You know when you're dragging it, you can feel it. There's a pull inside. Drop the bucket. Stop going back to the well and recognize Jesus as the source of everything. You want to close our eyes, bow our heads real quickly. Before we can give this spring away that God wants to flow in us and out of us into this world, we've first got to receive it. And we believe this is by accepting Jesus in our heart, confessing him as Lord.